Hello, Willowbrook family. Today's daily devo is Daniel chapter 1. Before I left for college, one of the best pieces of advice I received was this: maintain your identity. In other words, God has wired you together in a certain way. He created you for a purpose. And even though as you go through college and through life, you will expand your knowledge and experiences, but never forget who God made you to be in the first place. You'll have countless temptations to be someone you're not and to live a life that does not honor God. Don't even go there. Maintain your identity in Christ no matter what. And if you do this, God will bless you in so many ways. This is what we see in Daniel chapter 1. Nebuchadnezzar, king of the great Babylonian Empire, invades Jerusalem, and they take captive most of its people, including the best and the brightest. They are all marched to Babylon for what would be 70 years of captivity. The king ordered his chief of officials to bring to him some of the best-looking and smartest young men from Judah, so that they could be educated and trained for 3 years in the language and in the culture of Babylon. They would in turn enter into the king's service. Here is where we meet young Daniel and his 3 friends. The king removes their Hebrew names and gives them Babylonian names. Daniel becomes Belteshazzar, and the other young men are named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Part of their training meant that they were to be given the finest food and drink. Now, on the surface, that sounds awesome. I would be so excited for that, except for one thing. The king's rich food and wine would defile these young men. In other words, Daniel and his friends had set themselves apart to be holy before God, and it was forbidden for a Hebrew to eat and drink these rich foods. In verse 8 it says, "But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food." Maintain your identity. That's exactly what Daniel did. Now, it wasn't going to be all that easy. To turn down the food of the king may mean death. So, though, instead of staging a protest, Daniel speaks to the commander of the officials, and he asks him permission to have a different diet so that he would not defile himself. And you know what? God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. You see, when you maintain your identity, God is not going to leave you hanging. He'll be there right with you the whole way. Now, the commander told Daniel that he was afraid to do this because the king expected these young men to be strong and healthy, which in those days meant a little plump. If the king sees that these men are losing weight, he would have the commander's head. But Daniel assured the commander to test him and his friends for 10 days. Just give them vegetables and water. So the commander agreed. And you know what? It worked. And at the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked healthier than the others. So Daniel's special diet continued. They maintained their identity, and God blessed them. Now later, when the king spoke to them, these 4 friends stood out above all the rest. In fact, their wisdom and their understanding was 10 times better than all the magicians and the conjurers in the whole kingdom. Now, go back to verse 8. But Daniel made up his mind. When he was faced with the choice of defiling himself or not, he had to determine if this choice was a preference or a conviction. You see, a preference is a strong belief but it might totally change if the circumstances changed and got negative. But a conviction is not like a preference. It's something that you purpose in your heart and in your mind. And it's not going to change just because things get rough. A personal conviction on the inside will always show up on the outside in a person's lifestyle and choices. Daniel's conviction was maintain your identity. He was a man of conviction. So, when you are faced with the never-ending immorality and sin of this world, maintain your identity, and God will bless you for it. Have a great day in the Lord, Willowbrook.